Right now, I mean, just imagine 20,000 civilian delivery drivers effectively trapped in a live fire battlefield. But they aren't in trucks, they're on commercial cargo ships in the Persian Gulf. Welcome to this deep dive into two recent Splash articles where our mission today is to look at why the 2020s have become, well, just a brutal, unprecedented era for commercial seafarers.
Yeah, an era creating conditions unmatched since World War II, really. I mean, it is a terrible advertisement for a career at sea.
Exactly. And just to be completely clear up front for you listening, when looking at the logistics on the water regarding the current U.S. and Israeli coalition conflict with Iran, we are strictly reporting the events as described in the sources. So regardless of the politics, we're focusing entirely on how these events are impacting the commercial shipping industry and, its workers.
Right, because the human reality of those impacts is just grim. I mean, we're looking at the absolute definition of a systemic trap here.
And the sheer scale of that trap is staggering, right? You have 20,000 civilian seafarers caught in the Persian Gulf, which is essentially like a geographic cul-de-sac. Over the last 34 days, there have been more than 20 attacks, leaving 10 seafarers dead and 8 injured.
It is horrific.
It really is.
Yes.
So, okay, let's unpack this a bit. How do 20,000 commercial workers just physically end up stuck in a war zone?
Well, it really comes down to the brutal physics and the economics of global shipping. On paper, sure, maritime law gives these crews rights.
Right, like the right to refuse transit into a declared war zone, I assume?
Exactly. They have that right and the right to demand repatriation at the shipowner's expense. But in reality, geopolitical escalations happen overnight. By the time a region is declared a hot zone, a massive, slow-moving cargo ship is already physically committed to the route.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so you add in immense commercial pressure, strict charter contracts, and a total lack of alternative routes. These captains literally have nowhere to safely anchor. I mean, they can't just throw it in reverse.
So the legal protections just sort of evaporate on contact with reality.
Precisely. The United Nations is actually calling this level of stranding entirely unprecedented in the modern age. The International Transport Workers Federation has received over 1,000 desperate messages from crews trapped in that region.
Over 1,000. Wow.
Yeah, 1,000. They are, for all intents and purposes, sitting ducks.
The legal right to refuse transit doesn't really mean much when missiles are already flying, does it? And tragically, reading through these sources, this isn't the first time we've seen international maritime protections crumble when things get tough.
No, unfortunately, it is part of a broader pattern of systemic failure.
Right, the systemic failure today mirrors the dark days of the COVID-19 era. There was one really chilling case in the sources where a commercial ship had a crewmate die on board.
Oh, the Reeser incident, yes.
Exactly. Because no port would allow them to land the body due to pandemic restrictions, the crew was forced to keep their deceased crewmate in the ship's freezer. They were just continuously sailing from port to port like that.
It is a devastating example, of how quickly shore-based authorities will pull up the drawbridge and just leave seafarers to deal with the operational fallout entirely on their own.
Wait, but during COVID, the intent behind port closures was public health, misguided or not. Here, it is active geopolitical crossfire. I mean, we're talking about physical violence. Shouldn't there be emergency international protocols to handle sudden kinetic conflicts?
Well, the mechanisms for emergency protocols actually do exist, but they require political will to execute. For example, the International Maritime Organization recently backed the creation of a humanitarian corridor for the Persian Gulf.
Oh, kind of like the Black Sea Grain Initiative early in the Russia-Ukraine war?
Yes, precisely like that. A protected shipping lane, guaranteed by international powers to let civilian ships transit safely. The problem is, a fortnight has passed since that meeting, and the corridor hasn't materialized at all.
Nothing's happened.
Nothing. Instead of diplomatic solutions, you have political leaders publicly telling ships to show some guts and keep sailing.
Wow, easy to say from a safe, landlocked office.
Totally. The risks of those political decisions are entirely externalized. The decision makers face zero physical threat, while the brutal reality falls entirely on the civilian crews facing random violence.
Which really brings us back to you, the listener, and the cascading threat this poses to your everyday life. I mean, the vast majority of the global economy and world trade relies entirely on these seafarers.
Exactly. If the industry continues treating these lives as an acceptable risk or just disposable, you simply cannot attract the next generation of workers.
And without them, international trade as we know it just grinds to a halt. It leaves you with a really unsettling final thought to mull over.
It really does.
If the global maritime system is failing to protect these crews from highly visible missile strikes in active war zones, how can seafarers possibly trust the industry to protect them from the quieter, everyday dangers that receive zero global attention? Like, for instance, the devastating risk of a shipboard container fire quietly burning in the middle of the ocean.